Have you ever been ridiculed by someone who claimed to love you? Have you ever felt the weight of public humiliation from the very person you helped raise? Because that's what happened to me. The day my own grandson posted a video calling me stinky and crazy to thousands of people's laughter. It wasn't a pet name. It was mockery, contempt, shouts muffled by likes. And there I was, standing there, heartbroken, trying to understand how a true story of love and dedication had turned into a cruel joke on social media. My name is Helen, I'm 78 years old, and behind my gray hair and wrinkled skin, I carry a lifetime of sacrifice. I've been a mother, grandmother, teacher, counselor, nurse, cook, and for many years, the heart of a family that now seems to have forgotten who I am. His video went viral within minutes. My smelly, crazy grandmother, he wrote in the caption, laughing at my confused expression as he filmed me secretly, without my knowledge. He made me look ridiculous with frightening ease, but what hurt most wasn't the laughter. It was the silence afterward. No apology, no look of regret, just the emptiness of realizing that, to him, I was just a means of engagement. Have you ever been there? Have you ever felt like all the love you gave was wasted by someone who only thought about their own interests? Stay with me until the end, because what happened after this humiliation will make you rethink what respect, family, and dignity mean in old age. It's funny how life teaches, and sometimes it teaches with tears, sometimes it teaches with silence. It was in this silence that I began to see the world through different eyes. For days, I relived that scene, reading the comments. Some mocked, others defended, and there I was, in the midst of the hurricane, trying not to drown in the pain. But the deeper I delved into this sadness, the more a certainty grew within me. I needed to do something, not for revenge, but for myself, for my story, for all the silent voices that, like mine, were exposed without permission. That's when I started to realize that maybe, just maybe, this cruel video could be the beginning of something much bigger. You will understand how I realized in time to protect myself, and how I transformed a public offense into a silent movement of respect and recognition, because what started as a dirty joke became an emotional journey, a journey that's not just mine. It's shared by thousands of grandmothers, mothers, and women who have grown old feeling invisible. And it was there, at rock bottom, that I found a strength I didn't even know I still had. But before I tell you what I did, you need to understand how it all got to this point, because this story is more than just pain and shame. It has a twist, and that twist begins now. And it was in that silence, the one that comes after pain, when everyone has forgotten what they did, that I began to see more clearly. My story, which until then seemed small and unimportant, was actually a portrait of many others. Because what happened to me, unfortunately, happens every day. Only the name of the grandchild, the son, the relative changes, but the humiliation is always the same. Silent, cruel, disguised as a joke. And maybe that's why I'm here, telling you all this, not just to get this weight off my chest, but so that, if this story touched you in any way, you can share it too. Because I know there are many people out there harboring resentment, bottled up pain, and silent regret. So if any part of this revolted you, reminded you of something, or simply moved you, leave your thoughts in the comments below about what bothered you most. Sometimes, venting is the first step to healing, and your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, valued, and recognized, like this video. It may seem small, but every like shows YouTube that this content matters, that it should reach more people who need to hear it. And if this kind of story resonates with you, if you want to keep hearing real, painful stories, but full of strength, lessons, and truth, subscribe to the channel. Because here we talk about what no one wants to hear, but everyone needs to hear. And your presence here makes all the difference. Now, take a deep breath with me, because what comes next will show you that even a humiliated lady can change the entire game. And it all started with a single decision. When people see me today, slowly carrying my cloth bags, stopping to talk to the plants in the garden, they don't see the story. They only see what's left, what's aged. A nice old lady, some say. Others don't even look. But no one imagines what I've lived through. No one thinks of everything I've put aside to raise my children, educate my students, hold the world on my shoulders when it seemed about to crumble. It's easy to forget the strength of those who grow old silently, but those who truly know me know that behind those wrinkled hands, there's been struggle. There were days when I cooked for 10 people with what fit in a small pot. Days when I taught math to children who arrived at school hungry. Days when I cried in the bathroom, hidden, because a mother couldn't break down in front of her children. Caring has always been my way of loving, sewing, planting, organizing things around the house, calling neighbors to see if they were okay. These were small gestures, but full of meaning. And perhaps that's why it hurt so much to be turned into a joke. To see my image distorted to elicit hollow laughter, as if all those years of dedication could be summed up in a cruel caption and a TikTok filter. No one knew that behind my silence, there was a story, that before becoming a grandmother, I was a teacher for 40 years. And not just any teacher. I was the one who brought extra snacks to students who didn't have any. The one who wrote encouraging notes when she noticed a child was sad. I was also a single mother, a young widow. And yet, I never let love run out in that home. But it seems today's world doesn't care about behind the scenes. It just wants the spectacle, the ready-made joke, the humiliation that generates engagement. And that's what my grandson learned too early. He learned that he could exchange the truth for likes, that he could edit my life to fit into 15 seconds of exposure. But he forgot one important detail. Those who have survived a lifetime of sacrifice aren't destroyed so easily. The pain of being ridiculed by someone in your own family isn't just emotional, it's existential. It makes you question your worth, your trajectory, your very identity. I watched that video, those comments, and felt as if the whole world had laughed at a story no one knew. As if, suddenly, I'd stopped being the grandmother who told stories online and become just a caricature. An aging meme. But there's one thing age has taught me. The impact of our existence isn't in what others see, but in what we carry. And inside me, there was much more than pain. There was memory, strength, and a hidden truth that, for a long time, remained hidden. A part of me that learned to wait for the right moment. Because those who have lived so long already know, sometimes, silence is just the interval between pain and transformation. And perhaps that was his biggest mistake, thinking I would remain silent, that I would accept it as fate. He didn't know it, but something had awakened within me. An old desire to show who I truly was, to prove that it's not age that defines a person's worth, but the decisions they make when all seems lost. And so it was, between stitches and memories, that I began to chart a path, a new perspective on myself, a journey I hadn't asked to live, but which was now mine. And the deeper I delved into it, the clearer it became. There was something inside me that he would never understand, but that the world needed to hear. If you've come this far and feel that this story also speaks to you, write in the comments. I also carry my story, because sometimes, all we need is someone who understands that life doesn't fit into a 15-second video. He entered the room, laughing, cell phone in hand, calling to me with that tone that mixes mockery and sweetness. "Grandma, here's something. Quick." I was folding clothes on the bed, distracted, not even realizing it was a trap. He pointed the camera at me as if it were just another grandson's prank. He asked what I thought of a filter, a strange sound he'd added to the video. And I responded, as I always have, with affection, trying to keep up with this world that's no longer made for people my age. What I didn't know was that he had already edited everything, that the recording wasn't meant to show me later, but to post. And that's what he did. He posted it, with a title that cut through my soul like a dull knife. My smelly, crazy grandmother. Just like that, in bold letters, without any context, without any defense, just me there, with that look of someone who just wanted to participate, trying to understand. He took my image, my voice, my weary expression, and turned it into mockery, a cheap meme, a video of public humiliation disguised as entertainment. I only found out because a friend from church called me, very embarrassed, asking if I was okay. She said her granddaughter had sent me a funny video with a lady who looked like me. When I saw it, my heart stopped for a moment. I felt a heat rise in my chest. A mixture of shame, disbelief, and a pain that only those who have been betrayed by someone from within understand. It wasn't just about the video. It was about everything it represented. The distortion of my story, the disregard for my dignity, the ease with which decades of love can be transformed into a second of viral laughter. The comments were worse than the video. People laughed at my face, my mannerisms, my silence, saying I looked lost, that I was scary, that I was the face of TikTok in 2070, and he was proud, thanking me for the views, responding with laughing emojis as if it were all a family joke. Except it wasn't. It exposed a hidden truth that many people prefer to ignore, the way elderly people are treated when they're no longer useful, when they become uncomfortable for this generation's fast pace. At that moment, something inside me broke. But it didn't break like a broken plate. It broke like an old wall hiding a passage. Behind the pain, I began to see a new space, a space where there was no more room for pretense, where transformation wasn't a choice, but an urgency. Because if I did nothing, that image of myself distorted, cruel, malicious would become the only narrative. And I couldn't allow that, not out of pride, but out of respect for my own story. I spent sleepless nights, not because of the internet, but because of his silence at home. He greeted me as if nothing had happened, as if that post were just another content. And maybe, to him, it was. The scariest thing wasn't the contempt, it was the indifference. The ease with which he reduced me to an insignificant figure. But time, which took so much from me, also taught me to see beyond the surface. It wasn't just about me, it was about a pattern, about how this culture of exposure is eroding respect, erasing memories, mocking old age. I began to understand there was a hidden message there, a truth that needed to be shown, because behind every laugh in that video, there was a decision, the decision to humiliate, and I needed to make the decision to refuse, and that's when things started to change. Because even in silence, even hurt, I still had a voice, and it was about to be heard. If you're still here, reading with a heavy heart, write in the comments, this is not just a video, because when we recognize the pain, it stops being invisible. That week, I stopped talking. Not out of spite or pride, but because something inside me was reorganizing itself. It was as if each word I swallowed gave me more strength to think clearly. It wasn't time to argue, nor to demand explanations. It was time to observe, to understand, to reevaluate my own position in this story. I, who had always been seen as the one who sweetly solves everything, who calms spirits at Christmas dinner, who chokes back tears to keep the peace, began to question myself. Where had I lost myself in this role? The people around me continued their routines. Jake still walked around with his cell phone in his hand, as if the whole world were inside that device. My son called from time to time, asking if I needed anything, but without even bringing it up. The truth is, no one there knew what was going on inside me. They had no idea the silent transformation that was taking place. For years, I accepted the idea that my value lay in being useful, in being the one who does, the one who gives, the one who never gets in the way. But that video showed me something that hurt, but that I needed to see. In their minds, I was no longer someone with a voice, with influence, with impact. I was just part of the scenery, a supporting character in my own story. And I could no longer accept that. So I began to ask myself, what can a woman like me do in a world that only listens to those who shout? The answer came slowly, in small details. I realized I didn't need to shout. I needed to be strategic. I needed to act with the same emotional intelligence that helped me raise 3 children alone, manage a classroom full of children, survive widowhood and abandonment. It was time to use everything life had taught me. Only this time, for myself, I remember one moment in particular. I was sitting on the couch, alone, with my phone in hand. I stared at the screen, at that video that was still circulating. Thousands of views, people laughing, people cursing, people who didn't even know me, saying things about me as if they'd lived inside my skin. And in that moment, silently, I made a decision. I was no longer going to let them tell my story for me. It was like pressing an invisible button inside my mind. A key flipped. And I understood that that humiliation had been the trigger, not the end. That it was possible to transform that neglect into something greater. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with awareness, with presence, with dignity. I would teach, yes, but in a different way, as I always have, with firmness, with truth, with purpose. In the days that followed, I began to observe the world around me with different eyes. Every small action, every silence, Every choice revealed more than words could ever say. What seemed like a moment of pain was actually a revelation. I wasn't just the ridiculed grandma. I was the starting point of a turning point. And even though no one was seeing it, something inside me had already changed. This change wasn't loud. There were no speeches, no confrontations. It was a shift in mindset, a new way of seeing myself. I wasn't a victim, after all. I was the protagonist of a story that wasn't over yet. And when we understand this, everything around us begins to respond differently. If you've also experienced a moment like this, write in the comments. The key turned silently, because sometimes the sound of change begins in the deepest silence. It was an ordinary morning, one of those when the silence of the house seems louder than the noise of the world outside. But I sat down at my computer and typed how to create a TikTok channel. I had no idea where to begin, but the desire to transform that wound into purpose spoke louder than any fear. I had already learned so much in this life, learned to bathe a baby one-handed, to mend shoes when I couldn't afford new ones, to teach math using beans. Why not learn that too? The first time I opened the app, everything seemed confusing, noisy, out of sync, but I persisted. Because I understood that was where his voice had resonated, and that was where mine needed to reach. I just needed to find a different tone, something that would touch where filters and quick cuts couldn't. I started small, watching videos, paying attention to the behind the scenes of each post. What worked? What made someone stop and listen? To the end. The answer always lay in the same root: truth. That's when I decided to create my own profile. I used a name that said a lot without revealing anything. At VODSABE, Doria. No photos of myself. No Generation Z grandmother. Just stories. Memories of a lifetime condensed into short snippets. Phrases I said to my children. Advice I gave to pregnant students at 15. Memories of when everything was harder but also more sincere. No sensationalism. No characters. Just me, inside. In the early days, no one saw it. I posted it and left it there. I didn't tell anyone. It was my space, a place where, for the first time in a long time, I could exist without interruption. And perhaps that's why it began to touch people. Because when we speak with an open heart, those who need to hear it, feel it. And that's what started to happen. One comment, then another. That story reminded me of my grandmother. I cried hearing that. Why doesn't anyone show this side of life? Suddenly, my voice, the one that had been lost for so long within the walls of my home, was finding an echo in places I hadn't even imagined. While Jake continued posting soulless dances and jokes, I spoke of silence, of forgiveness, of difficult decisions. I spoke of the woman who dropped out of school to care for her sister, of the other who scrubbed stairs at dawn to pay the rent. I spoke of the transformation that comes after pain, of the mindset we develop when life gives us no choice. I spoke of myself, without saying it was me, and there, unbeknownst to him, I was reconstructing my narrative. The irony is that the more he sought visibility, the more I gained respect, not through numbers, but through connection. I didn't want likes, I wanted someone, somewhere, to feel less alone because of my words, and little by little, that began to happen. People wrote to me that they saw the video of the grandmother from the countryside who sold everything to care for her sick grandson. People said they called their mother again after seeing a similar story. It was as if each memory posted opened space for a dormant memory in the viewer. And it was in this silent setting, without anyone knowing, that I began to turn the tables. Not out of revenge, but out of conscience. Because while he was collecting empty likes, I was winning over real hearts. And when the truth hits deep, no filter can erase it. I was, little by little, doing what mattered most, leaving a legacy. If this story also awakened any forgotten memories, write in the comments. The truth found me here. Because sometimes, it is precisely in the small revelations that our greatest transformation begins. Until then, everything had been very much my own. My memories, my pain, my inner struggle. But something began to change the moment I realized that this story, however personal, wasn't unique. It wasn't isolated. All I had to do was carefully read the comments on the profile I'd created to realize I was just one among thousands. The loneliness that visited me at night was the same loneliness that sat on the couch next to so many other women, men, grandparents, and parents who had already been forgotten in the shadows of digital life. The reports arrived silently, without noise. My daughter blocked me after I couldn't take care of my grandson. My husband died and no one calls me anymore. They only remember at Christmas. My grandson only shows up when he wants to take a picture with me. They were like echoes of a collective feeling, but one no one named, the feeling of being disposable after a certain age. As if love had an expiration date. As if, as we grow older, we become a vague memory, useful only when convenient. These stories began to accumulate in my mind like patches of a quilt, and it was impossible to ignore the pattern. The hidden truth behind so much silence was clear. Respect had become a luxury, and family bonds a currency for attention. Social media, which could bring us closer, was becoming showcases of abandonment, not just for me, for all of us. And it was when this realization hit home that a new idea emerged. I no longer wanted to just tell stories. I needed to show. But how do you show what you don't see? How do you photograph an absence? How do you denounce a contempt that doesn't scream, but wounds? The answer came to me in a flash, as I looked at an old photo of my family. We were all there together, smiles, hugs, holding hands. A frozen image of a time when affection was still non-negotiable. I took the photo, tore it in half with trembling hands, and placed it on the table. It hurt me, but it also freed me, because there, in that tear, was represented everything I felt. I recorded a simple video. No music, no animated caption, no filter, just the image of the torn photo, and a phrase that came out of me as if it had been written long ago. What you sow in likes, you reap in tears. I posted it without expecting anything, and I went back to stitching, as if nothing had happened. But something had. Because when I checked my phone a few hours later, there were thousands of views, and they weren't just numbers. They were people with accumulated pain, with similar stories, with truths they'd never spoken out loud. It was as if that tear in the image had opened a crack in the viewer's chest. The video went viral, not because of the algorithms but because of the relatability, because of the raw truth it carried. It was just an image, but it said everything. And amid so many comments, one struck me deeply. My mother died thinking she'd done something wrong, but she just got older. That stopped me, because that's exactly what it was. We're all being led to believe the problem lies within us, that it's our age, our slowness, our fragility. But it's not. It's the rush, the superficiality, the lack of presence. The explosion of that video showed me that social media still has room for real feelings, that there are still people wanting to hear the truth, that the journey of loneliness, though silent, is shared by many and can become a bridge. And it was there, between one notification and the next, that I knew something had begun, and there was no turning back. If any of this resonated with you, write in the comments. I am also part of this picture, because sometimes all that's missing is someone showing that one person's pain can be everyone's memory. After that video, a lot changed. Not in the outside world. There was still haste, inattention, and that urgency for disposable content, but within people. Because the response I received wasn't made of cold numbers, but of sincere words, painful stories, memories torn apart from within. It was as if, suddenly, a large mirror had formed, and everyone who passed by saw something of themselves reflected in that silent image. And that's why this space here matters, not for me, but for us. Because every time you write in the comments what you felt, experienced, or thought, you're not just venting, you're paving the way for others to feel comfortable remembering their own story. When you like this video, you're telling the algorithm that this kind of content deserves to exist, that truth has a place, that emotion is also relevant. And when you subscribe, you're not just following the channel, you're becoming part of a community that listens, that feels, that respects the memories of those who have lived long enough to know the weight and value of silence. If anything in this story has revolted, moved, or made you reflect, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your participation is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content, and that's what keeps this conversation alive, necessary, and deeply human, because there are things we only understand when we listen with an open heart, and only those who have experienced them firsthand know that. Everything continued at the same pace. My videos remained simple, silent, and perhaps because of that, they were increasingly viewed. No fancy productions, just stories. And although I never revealed my face, something in the way I spoke made people feel there was truth there. It wasn't acting. It was memory, and those who truly feel it recognize it immediately, across town. Jake continued to feed his profile with empty jokes, collages, dance routines, everything the algorithm loves. But over time, he noticed his follower count wasn't the same. Something had shifted. Comments appeared asking if he was familiar with Advoda Sabudar Sabiedoria. Others said things like, "You should watch this video. It reminds me so much of your family." And he, of course, didn't suspect it, or pretended not to, until an unexpected invitation arrived, a guest spot on a podcast geared toward young influencers. Something routine, just another lighthearted interview about how to grow online. He went. Cool clothes, confident demeanor, that same smile you use when you want to appear in control. Everything seemed to be going well, until the host, in a smooth turn, dropped the question with the ease of someone throwing a stone into a calm lake. "Jake, have you seen Advoda Sabidoria's video? That lady who posts impactful quotes with old photos? That's your grandmother, right?" His silence lasted less than 2 seconds, but those watching noticed. His throat dried. His gaze fell. His breathing changed. It was the kind of truth that, even if he tried to deny it, was already too loose to hold back. Because it wasn't just about me, it was about what he had done, and what the whole world now knew, there, in that brightly lit studio. Before blaring cameras and thousands of live viewers, he froze. He tried to laugh, change the subject, say he'd heard. But that moment was enough, that brief hesitation, that lost look for everyone to understand. It was her. The woman ridiculed months ago was the same voice, now touching hearts across the country, and he, the smiling grandson, was the boy who had sown pain and reaped silence. The networks were unforgiving. The interview cut spread like wildfire. People were recovering the old video and comparing it to Advoda Sabidoria's posts. People started piecing it together themselves. The phrases, the stories, the subtext, it all made sense now. And suddenly, I went from being just a discreet presence online to the topic. Not out of vanity, but because of the weight of the revelation. There was no speech from me, no official statement, just the impact of a hidden truth that had finally come to light. Because, when dignity speaks, it doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be heard once. And the world, finally, was listening. He, especially. If you've ever had a moment where the truth hit you without warning, write in the comments, "I saw when everything turned around," because there are revelations that don't need explanation, just courage to face them. What began as a social media unease turned into an avalanche within days. The followers who once applauded his jokes began to disappear. Slowly at first, as if they were simply bored. But soon the exodus became public. And the same speed with which he had risen was what brought him down. One video, one interview, one truth revealed, and the house of cards began to crumble. The messages, previously full of giggles and emojis, changed tone. "You don't do that to a grandmother. You knew exactly what you were doing." My heart ached for her. The audience, the same ones who had once laughed with me without knowing it, were now demanding it. Not because I asked, not because I said anything, but because conscience, when awakened, has a power of its own. And when respect enters the room, sarcasm loses its place. The brands that sponsored him reacted as the market usually does when reputations are tarnished, swiftly and coldly. Emails were sent, partnerships were cancelled, invitations were withdrawn. He, who felt at the top, didn't understand how everything could change so quickly. But it was simple. This wasn't just the story of a grandmother and a grandson. It represented something bigger, of an exposed social wound, of a generation tired of seeing love used as content and pain transformed into entertainment. And then he began to grow quiet. He stopped posting. The account, which had previously been updated daily, went silent, as if finally hearing everything he had previously chosen to ignore. I don't know if he considered reaching out to me. I don't know if he was embarrassed, regretful, or simply scared of the consequences. But in that moment, none of that mattered so much, because it wasn't about him anymore, or me. It was about the impact, the turning point, the lesson that arose from that chaos. I never wished for anyone's downfall, much less a grandchild. What I wanted and still want is for us to learn, to stop and think about what we're building, because when we ridicule those who raised us, the shame doesn't just stay with those exposed, it spills over to those who laugh. And the cruelest thing about all this is that it took a scandal for some truths to begin to be heard. The so-called law of return, which so many people cite in disbelief, has reared its head, and it wasn't with revenge, shouting, or scandal. It was in silence, in discomfort, in an unexpected turnaround. And this is the kind of transformation that can't be measured in views, because when our perspective changes, everything around us needs to reorganize. He had time to reflect, time to experience firsthand what it's like to be exposed, judged, and digitally abandoned. Perhaps there he understood a little of what it's like to grow old and be ignored. And, in some way, this may have been the beginning of something new, because sometimes it's only when we lose everything that we begin to see clearly what truly matters. If at some point in your life, you have also seen someone fall because they did not see others with respect, write in the comments. Pain also teaches, because there are truths that life only shows when we stop pretending we don't see them. That happened too quickly. Within a few months, my profile was on talk shows, mentioned in news reports, and discussed in roundtables about empathy, respect, and social media. They didn't show my face, and I insisted on keeping it that way. Anonymity gave me freedom. What mattered wasn't who I was on the outside, but what I said on the inside. People wrote to me as if I were an old friend, a grandmother lost in time who had suddenly found her way back into their homes. They spoke of the mother they had already buried, the father they had forgotten to hear, the grandmother who lived in the depths of their memories. It touched me in a way that was hard to explain. It was beautiful, but it also hurt, because the more I was heard out there, the more the silence inside grew. They offered me TV spots, video interviews. They even wanted to make a documentary about my story, but I refused. Not out of fear, nor pride, but because I knew that, at some point, all this noise could become a distraction. And what I carried wasn't a spectacle. It was memory. It was a seed. Deep down, I knew I had won. But I also learned that some victories don't come with applause. They come with loneliness, with that strange feeling of being right, and yet feeling empty. Yes, I received affection. Yes, I heard beautiful words from people who understood my pain. But when the camera turned off, when the house fell silent and night slowly fell, it was always the same image that returned. The photo, the old one, where he was still a child and looked at me as if I were the world. The same one I tore up for the video, now taped back together, poorly mended. I looked at it as if searching for an explanation, as if trying to understand when everything started slipping through my fingers. And it was on one of those nights, sitting in the armchair, my feet covered by an old blanket, that I whispered something he might never hear. I just wanted a hug, Jake. No likes. That was it. That was all. That whole storm, that whole twist, that whole impact, born of a simple, ancient desire to be seen, to be respected, to be loved without having to prove anything. It's not that I regret it. I don't, but I recognize the price. The journey of truth has a cost, because when you stand up, you also walk away. When you show yourself whole, those who aren't ready to face their own fragility tend to retreat. And that's what happened. Jake disappeared. He fell silent. And I respected it. I didn't chase after him. I didn't demand anything. Because sometimes, time teaches more than any conversation. In the end, it's not about fame. It's not about ratings. It's about dignity. About keeping your head up even when your heart is broken. About continuing to tell stories even when they hurt. About planting, even without knowing who will harvest. If you understand what it's like to win on the outside and still feel empty on the inside, write in the comments. Not every victory has applause, because there are journeys that only those who live them feel. And even when the world applauds, it is the silence of our room that reveals what the soul still carries. Time passed, as it always does, silently, without asking permission, without warning that it's taking another piece of us. And now that everything has calmed down, that the spotlight has dimmed and the algorithms have gone looking for other names to highlight, what remains are not the videos, nor the views, nor the articles. What remains is what I learned and what I let the world learn from me. That many people thought I wanted justice. Others said I did it out of revenge. But those who truly listened to me know, it wasn't about punishment, it was about revealing the hidden truth that lives in silent houses, in the looks no one tries to understand anymore, in the stories that were being erased as if aging were synonymous with disappearing. I simply opened the door to a reality that was always there, only no one was looking. In the end, it's not about social media, It's about connection, about humanity, about respect. Because when you dehumanize someone who raised you, who fed you, who protected you when you couldn't even speak, you don't just hurt that person, you hurt your own roots. You cut the thread that sustains your identity. And sooner or later, that thread snaps. The pain of someone who loves and is ridiculed makes no noise, but it leaves its mark. It shapes, it transforms. And it was this transformation that brought me here, with dignity.com, and the firmness of someone who has cried too much to pretend they don't feel. It was never about me. It was about everyone who, like me, learned to keep quiet so as not to cause discomfort, who heard for years that it was just a joke, when their hearts begged for respect. Today, I look at all this and understand there's a kind of love that, when betrayed, teaches more than any lesson. It teaches about presence, about limits, about the impact of small decisions, about the danger of laughing at what is sacred, because there's something sacred in the person who gave you everything without expecting anything in return. And when you turn that into a joke, what loses isn't the person, it's you. That's why I say, with all the clarity life has given me, never underestimate the pain of those who raised you. Never treat an elderly person as a joke, because one day, it could be you. One day, it will be you. With hands that shake, a little more, with a failing memory, with a gaze that carries stories no one asks about anymore. And on that day, you'll wish you had been different with those who came before. But perhaps there's still time. Perhaps now is the time to change our perspective, to rethink gestures, words, habits, to rekindle old conversations, to apologize before they turn into regret. Because what you sow in likes, you reap in tears, and some tears never come back. If you carry a similar story within you, or if these words made you think differently about someone in your life, write in the comments. I choose to honor my roots, because there are legacies that are not measured in fame, they are measured in conscience. If you've made it this far, it's because some part of this story resonated with you. Maybe it reminded you of someone. Maybe it made you look within. Maybe it gave you the courage to say what was never said. This space exists precisely for this, for us to take a deep breath and feel together. And if this content resonated with you, if it made you see something differently, subscribe to the channel. We continue to build this place of listening and truth with each video, and your presence here is what makes it all worthwhile. Also leave a comment saying, I walked with you until the end, just so I know you've been with me this far. Your comment may seem simple, but it shows that this conversation is worth having. And of course, if this video touched you in any way, leave a like, not because of the number, but because it helps this message reach more hearts who might need to hear something like this today. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click and continue with me there. Our conversation still has a lot to say.